The SURF-P launched an advance party, or ADVON, consisting of experts from each of the 4 SURF-P elements, along with a small security force. Their mission was to secure and evaluate the scene, determine ingress and egress routes for the main body, find the hot zone, set up chemical detection equipment, set up the site for the mass decon line, and report back to the main body any and all pertinent information. Once the ADVON completed its evaluation, secured the scene, and pre-staged the mass decon line, the decontamination team and medical team were brought in. This is when the real work began. The decon team's task was to unload 4 box trucks full of equipment and set up a mass decontamination line per OSHA standards. A large visqueen sheet was laid down to collect the soon-to-be contaminated water. 4 tents were erected on the visqueen to form the mass decon line. The decon teams placed pallets, lighting, buckets, rollers, hoses, brushes, and other items required for decon inside the tents. Off to the side, the decon team set up the hazardous waste collection point. This consisted of several barrels placed on a visqueen sheet to collect the wastewater. The water is pumped from the decon line to the waste collection point, where it is put into the barrels and ultimately disposed of properly. The team also had to set up the monitor section, which entailed setting up and testing their chemical monitors. Lastly, the decon team set up a technical decon line which paralleled the mass decon line. The technical decon line is used to rapidly decontaminate the SURF-P's own personnel after they rotate through the hot and warm zones. The medical team's primary tasks were to set up the medical triage point and the undress tent and the redress tent at the ends of the decon line. They offloaded and staged their equipment, which consisted of stretchers, NATO gurneys, 2 tents, blankets, Tyvek clothing, blood pressure cuffs, bandages, and various medical equipment. They also set up the check-in and check-out points to ensure that everyone is tagged appropriately with their medical condition and that all patients go completely through the decon line. At this point, the security team with its additional forces was expanding the perimeter and the SAR team was preparing and testing its chemical suits and equipment. The command and control element set up its monitor station to be used to monitor the decon line status during setup and the number of casualties by type processed, and to coordinate logistical requirements during the operation. Once the decon line was completed, the commander and safety officer walked through the line to ensure that it was safe to begin operations. As soon as the commander cleared the line and gave the order, the first SAR team was launched to extract casualties, and everyone in the warm zone donned their chemical suits. The search and rescue team utilized its resources to extract casualties from in and around the simulated cruise ship terminal and bus crash. The team was also required to do preliminary triage on casualties to prioritize whom to extract first. Once they brought the first casualties to the casualty collection point, the decon line was considered open. The medical team logged in the casualties, triaged, treated as necessary, and assisted the casualties through the undress tent, cutting off clothing or removing clothing as required. The decon team then took over and assisted the casualties in the wash tent, scrubbing and spraying water as required. The casualties were then passed to the monitor section of the decon line, where they were tested to determine if any residual agent might have still been present. If so, the casualty was sent back to the wash tent for further scrub down. If not, they were passed to the redress tent and the medical section. At this point, the medical section treated any wounds as required and assisted the casualty into the temporary clothing and on to the checkout station. Once the casualty had checked out of the decon line, they were assisted to awaiting ambulances and turned over to local authorities. Once all the casualties were processed through the line, the commander shut the line down and prepared a closeout report to give to the IC. This report entailed exactly what was accomplished, how many casualties were processed, and how many logistical supplies were expended. In a real incident, all of the tents and everything in them would have been considered hazardous and would have been left in place to be properly disposed of. Shortly after Index was declared, representatives of the participating agencies gathered to discuss what worked in the exercise and what didn't. The senior leaders pulled no punches, and while several tactics, techniques, and procedures used to respond during the exercise were reinforced, several others were identified as needing modification. UI05 featured the first large-scale live deployment of a SURF-P in a terrorism scenario and resulted in many lessons learned. Overall, the exercise was highly successful in meeting the 9th CST's objectives. The 9th CST wishes to express their appreciation to all the participating agencies, the Naval Base Ventura County for use of their facilities, and the Center for Asymmetric Warfare for their assistance in planning, facilitating, conducting, and controlling the exercise.